According to Coleman 2026, on the afternoon of January 18, 2026, Chung Lee Thao, a Hmong American citizen, was detained by federal immigration officers at his Minnesota home. Thao's daughter-in-law reported hearing loud bangs at her door, which she quickly alerted Thao to, arousing him from his sleep.
The agents then forcefully entered the home without presenting any warrant signed by a judge and detained and removed Thao from the residence, dragging him out in only his underwear, an event witnessed by his daughter-in-law and 4-year-old grandson.
Thao was later transported to a remote location where agents attempted to photograph him. The Department of Homeland Security would later reveal that agents were taking place in a targeted operation, which sought to arrest 2 sex offenders who were reported to live at Thao's residence.
The agents soon realized that Thao was not who they were looking for and established he was a United States citizen with no prior criminal record. Approximately 2 hours later, Thao was returned back to his home and instructed to show his ID to agents.
After providing identification, the agents left without any acknowledgement of wrongdoing and left Thao and his family shaken by the encounter.
Welcome to today's episode of Policy in Action, Immigration. My name is Abigail Hannan.
And I'm Luiz Sanchez.
Today, we'll be taking a deep dive into one of the most significant policy changes in recent years in regards to immigration expansion.
You may have seen videos online or even articles about ICE raids, ICE-related killings, altercations with immigration enforcement, or literally any other immigration-related incident.
These surface-level altercations have spread across the media like wildfire, raising concern for how immigration operations are conducted.
Today, we'll dive deeper into how the administration's immigration expansion plan has resulted in multiple injustices regarding civil procedure and constitutional protections.
While we discuss the administration's policy changes, we will discuss what new measures were introduced into law and how these decisions have reshaped the conversation surrounding immigration, constitutional protections, and executive power. We'll break down the major actions taken by the administration, look at the legal and ethical concerns regarding these changes, and talk through the real-world impacts these changes have had on communities nationwide.
So whether you're here to understand the details behind the policy changes, the constitutional and legal components, or just broaden your knowledge about immigration policy, this episode will guide you through the key moments of these changes and what they mean for the country moving forward.
Incidents like Thao's highlight a deeper and more troubling reality. Immigration enforcement has increasingly blurred the line between targeted operations and indiscriminate policing, often sweeping U.S. citizens into it. This story is one of the many cases in which immigration agencies have used questionable tactics during their operations that lack the thoroughness sufficient enough to conduct their operation in a procedural manner.
Immigration is not a new concept. Immigration efforts stretch back to the late 18th century, beginning with acts such as the Alien and Sedition Act of 1798, which gave the president power to detain and deport any non-citizens which are deemed dangerous.
The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was another major impact on immigration, serving as the first law to ban a specific nationality from entering the country. These discriminatory and racially fueled acts sought to protect white workers and tradition within the United States, establishing a prejudicial hatred towards groups that threaten their way of life.
The 20th century saw a great change in immigration policies in correlation to the civil rights movement at the time. With the nation fighting against racism and inequalities, lawmakers could not maintain racist immigration laws that did not align with the direction the nation was heading. The Holt-Celler Act of 1965 was one of the first acts influenced by the events of the civil rights movement. The act ended discriminatory national origin quotas and reflected a new system built on equality and democracy influenced by the nation's need for equality.
According to the Department of Homeland Security, ICE was created in 2003 following the events of 9/11 under the Bush administration. Their original purpose was to protect national security as an investigative agency, removing any person unlawfully present in the United States who deemed a threat to national security.
In accordance with Plankey-Videla 2025, under the Trump administration, immigration agencies have now shifted their objective to become a mass deportation force, carrying out large-scale operations through broadening measures.
We interviewed expert witness Chris Stolen, assistant teaching professor of Homeland Security at Penn State Harrisburg, to hear his thoughts about the administration's shift in regards to immigration.
I think it's a professional law enforcement agency, but it has in areas overreached. I mean, the president last year knows more the politics of it, the politics. Well, when Trump was running for president, he said he would only deport those who've committed egregious crimes and felonies. Well, that has obviously not been the case. There have been some citizens who've been detained, some green card holders who've been detained, some visa holders who've been detained. So I think for the most part, the president has gone way too far in terms of deportations and enforcement. We can't deport a U.S. citizen. Obviously, that's wrong. It's illegal and unethical. But the purpose of empowering, I continue with what the public wanted, is clearly overreach right now.
Some of the administration's operations, as covered by the media and local news outlets, have led to outrage regarding how ICE and other agencies conduct their operations. Victims like Renee Good and Alex Preddy are just some of the people harmed by immigration enforcement agencies, sparking concern for the procedural standards agencies must comply with when fulfilling their duties.
On January 25, 2017, under President Trump's first term, Trump initiated the Enhancing Public Safety in the Interior of the United States Act, which prioritized the removal of undocumented citizens under certain conditions. According to the American Immigration Council, these conditions consist under these factors:
Convicted of any criminal offense, have been charged with any criminal offense and the charge is unresolved, have committed acts that constitute a chargeable criminal offense, have engaged in fraud or willful misrepresentation in connection with any official matter or application before a government agency, have abused any program related to the receipt of public benefits, are subject to final order of removal but have not departed, or in the judgment of an immigration officer, otherwise pose a risk to the public safety or national security.
And while President Trump has fulfilled these duties, the administration's actions demonstrate operations that don't align with stated public policy, such as the deportation of green card citizens.
Recently, there has been an influx of attention towards ICE following their aggressive actions in states like Minnesota, and more people are starting to question the moral compass of immigration agencies. Where they originally stated their focus was going to be on the removal of undocumented immigrants and criminals,
Here's a quick look into what's really been happening. According to the American Immigration Council, unlawful traffic stops without reasonable suspicion, which has solely been centered around racial profiling, which often leads to high-speed chases and accidents, which pose a threat to public safety.
we learned from the American Immigration Council that ICE is conducting Kavanaugh stops, which is when they sweep places where they believe undocumented immigrants will be, like homes that have been under construction, parking lots, workplaces, and they've also started unlawfully issuing arrest warrants after or during an arrest is being made in order to justify large-scale enforcement.
One of the major things that have changed from Trump's first administration is his nationwide expansion plan. During the administration's first term in 2017, their focus mainly centered around border security and expanding the southern border. While deportation efforts were still enforced, their main focus was border enforcement.
However, his 2025 term marked a significant shift from border security to one of the largest expansions of immigration enforcement in modern history. The administration's shift was felt all across the country on January 20th, when one of the administration's first executive orders aimed to remove birthright citizenship. To understand the impact of this order, we have to look at the 14th Amendment. Since 1868, it's guaranteed citizenship to anyone born in the U.S., regardless of their parents' immigration status, and the administration's attempt to revoke this long-standing constitutional precedent set the tone for their objective regarding their immigration expansion plans.
According to the American Immigration Lawyers Association, the Supreme Court later ruled that the order was unconstitutional and unprecedented to be passed into law. Even though the order did not go into effect, the attempt itself sent a powerful message to the people of the country, and for many it showed just how far the administration was willing to go just to expand deportation efforts.
The attempted removal of birthright citizenship served to be one of the first executive orders signed by the president, establishing the administration's reconsideration of birthright citizenship under their new immigration initiative. When asking our expert, Dr. Chris Dolan, about the administration's executive order to end birthright citizenship, this is what he had to say.
So a lot of this became so associated with Kristi Noem's political goals that they became clearly constitutionally questionable. I don't see how the birthright citizenship, which is written into the 14th Amendment, is going to be changed. First of all, the Supreme Court can't overturn a constitutional amendment. A constitutional amendment supersedes a Supreme Court decision. But I mean, a lot of this, again, it's political. It's designed to be in the news to make the administration look like it's being tough on immigration. But I think that time has passed when, in fact, that it's overreached on immigration.
If this executive order were to be written into law, it would have had drastic effects on the children of immigrants who have been born in the United States. These children would have faced deportation, being sent back to their parents' country of origin, which in many cases, the child has never experienced. but attempts to instate this unconstitutional order. Some ethical concerns have been raised in regards to the order's role in the administration's objective. Whether you see it as a necessary measure to ensure security or the president's overreach of power, obstructing the Constitution only gives way for more injustices to occur.
On the topic of precedents, the Sensitive Locations Act was another one of President Trump's major actions during his first few days in office. In this case, this was one of the orders that the administration actually succeeded in abolishing. This order, established in 1993 under the Clinton administration, limited immigration enforcement, including arrests, searches, and surveillance in sensitive areas such as schools, churches, and hospitals.
This act was essentially put in place as a safeguard to ensure that people could utilize essential services without the fear of running into immigration. Up to this point, this act had been upheld by 4 presidential terms for over 30 years and worked as a safeguard for people to use essential services. But with the administration's push to expand deportation efforts, this long-standing precedent was abolished. According to Pedamonte 2024, the abolishment of the Sensitive Locations Act now enables immigration enforcement agencies to search and raid schools, places of worship, and hospitals, creating a wider range of places available for agents to detain and deport illegal immigrants.
Let's turn it back to our expert witness.
I think the problem with that enforcement, it was just obviously bad optics, and it was also enforced within the context of warrantless raids, where there weren't, especially under under Kristi Noem, there weren't in many areas, like in places of worship or in hospitals. The core problem became that they were more driven by policy, not constitutional protections for people. So it spread more fear than actually achieving a policy goal. And for many, it was more performative. High-profile raids at schools would get on the news in what looked like the administration was being tough, but there was a lot of blowback, obviously. So I think that was an example of classic overreach on the part of DHS.
As it was reported by the National Immigration Law Center,
This change has raised many ethical concerns regarding which places are searched and surveillance, and it's raised a wave of fear amongst not only immigrants, but citizens as well, not knowing if they'll be caught in the crossfire of an immigration operation.
Following the Council of Foreign Relations,
The emphasis on expanding enforcement measures over existing constitutional interpretations raised concerns about the potential for legal disputes and civil rights implications. The establishment of the Sensitive Locations Act, along with the attempted removal of citizens protected by the 14th Amendment right, the administration has begun to create uncertainty for their new immigration policies as the country prepares themselves for what the administration plans next.
Okay, so now that we've covered some of the context regarding previous immigration policy and talked a little bit more about the current policy changes regarding immigration expansion, I would like to turn your attention to some of the effects that these policies have had on the future of the country. More specifically, international students.
international students have been heavily affected by the expansion, as most international students reside in the country on some variation of a visa, like an F1, M1, J1, or for graduate students, an H1B visa. Most international students who finish their study continue to live in the United States. The Economic Innovation Group 2024 reported that about 41% of students decided to reside in the country after their studies were concluded. And according to Kreisenberg and Hook 2025, 1.5 million students received F1 visas in 2023, a new record number.
According to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's own SEVIS Help Hub, the termination of F and M1 students are primarily terminated and decided by school officials. This could be for reasons such as failure to comply with program requirements or failure to maintain legal status. This termination process is commonly only done by schools and universities. However, with the expansion of immigration, this process has seen some changes.
According to Bowen and Luiz 2025, as soon as April 2025, many students' F1 visas have begun to be revoked, and for many new incoming students at prestigious schools such as Harvard, F, M, and J visas have been suspended from entry into the United States completely. Visa revocations do not necessarily force a student to leave the country. Students may still reside in the country with a revoked visa, but cannot re-enter the country if they decide to leave.
However, this is not what is forcing them out of the country. According to the National Law Review 2025, DHS has begun to terminate students' F1 status. As opposed to revoking a student's visa, terminating status forces students to leave the country. The Department of Homeland Security is basing determination under failure to maintain status. This can include things such as being convicted of a crime, violating program rules, or failing to report an address.
At this moment, I would like to turn it back to our speaker, who gives his opinion regarding visa revokings within his academic realm.
Businesses are now being charged, $100,000 per visa request, the H-1B visa. Businesses now have to pay, I think the previous fee was $10,000, now it's $100,000. And so that has significant economic implications. Like, for example, if the faculty at Penn State, if we were all of a sudden absent our international faculty, we would have to pay $100,000 per faculty member who's non-U.S. international to fill those particular seats. And we just couldn't do it. We'd go out of business. So I would say that one of the biggest changes in terms of procedures is the fee on the H-1B visa. I think that's a mistake, and that should be immediately drawn down because or revoked, because I think it's an egregiously high fee for any business or nonprofit or educational institution to pay. And again, just like in your previous question, I think that the case of ICE overreach is serious, it's real, and I'm concerned mainly with the international implications, how we're viewed as a country.
These termination of status, according to the National Law Review 2025, have occurred with little to no communication from the U.S. government regarding their status. What we're seeing now is a result of the impact that immigration expansion has had on agencies like DHS, where DHS has now acted as a primary source for status termination, removing students without notice or reason.
In correspondence to this matter, a federal lawsuit was filed against the Department of Homeland Security following an F-1 status termination. Liu versus DHS covers a Dartmouth PhD student who was given no prior knowledge nor explanation from the government that his status had been terminated.
The university confirmed that Liu had no prior violations and that the university played no role in reporting anything. The Department of Homeland Security provided no reasoning. This case is still ongoing.
As we wrap up today's episode, we can now to a further extent show the actions in which immigration efforts have overreached. After hearing stories like Thao's, highlighting policy changes that have been made under Trump's administration, the input of experts like Dr. Chris Dolan, and explaining their relations to the Constitution and the rights of citizens. By attempting to revoke constitutional precedent and expanding large-scale enforcements, which have harmed immigrants and citizens alike, we can suggest beyond a reasonable doubt how immigration forces have steadily overreached their hand at the hands of the law. By enforcing wide-scale expansion plans on citizens like Thao and Preddy, we see how they've been harmed at the hands of immigration agencies by the lack of protocol and ethical considerations.
At this moment, we would like to turn your attention to our expert one last time, where he gives his academic and social view to suggest how we as a country can go about immigration moving forward.
But I also think what the missing element, and this might be me being naive, is we need an immigration policy that is comprehensive. People who are here and are not registered or have papers need to have some sort of pathway to a green card, to permanent legal resident status. Most immigrants in the United States who are here legally or illegally are not committing crimes. We actually depend on them for our economy. So having some kind of, and that's the big problem in immigration policies, the people who come here, overstay a visa or enter illegally. A lot of the times it's not somebody hopping the border. It's a student coming and overstaying the visa, or it's someone who comes to the United States and on a work visa, but doesn't follow through on the paperwork or whatever. And they hide. And so therefore, and they're not allowed to come out of the shadows, because if they go to a citizenship center, which is run by DHS, they fear that they're going to be arrested. Well, they need to be shielded from that and given the opportunity to be certified, to be here legally, to have papers, and to work legally, and have a pathway eventually to citizenship. That's what I would want to see, and I think that needs to be rationally balanced with targeted efforts to remove criminals in the United States, and to deport them, and to focus on, organized criminal behavior like gangs, traffickers, those types of things. But people who are here legally or illegally and not committing crimes and contributing to society, where the lion's share need to stay.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Policy in Action. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn for more to come.